welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm David Patton, and we're at David Horowitz's Restoration Weekend, and delighted to have with us now Mr. Robert Spencer, the blogger, editor-in-chief of Jihad Watch, and also a best-selling New York Times author. So great to have you with us today.
Thank you very much. Very glad you had me on. Thank you.
Pleasure. So a lot of your work has looked at the problem of radical Islam, Islamism, if you will, as opposed to people who are Muslims, peace-loving Muslims who practice their faith. I wanted to start out by pointing out that a lot of the discussion you have is specifically targeted to violent trends of people who encourage violence or at least don't decry violence, and so that's really our focus. When we look at extremism, extremist Islamism in the United States, is it getting worse? And also, where is it worse? We know there are certain regions that seem to have greater difficulties, let's say.
Well, in the United States, there's not really a region that you can pinpoint that has a greater difficulty with this kind of thing than others. Minnesota is noteworthy in regard to the Somali community in particular, and the high level of immigration of whole communities of Somalis with very little, actually no vetting at all to determine if they were already part of jihad groups, if they were of the mindset that might lead them to join jihad groups. That is certainly an instance of a region that's problematic, and really everywhere there are other Somali communities in Lewiston, Maine, and in other areas of the country, in Colorado and in Texas, that have already shown some problems in the same way. The one in Minnesota, of course, is very noteworthy for sending jihad terrorists back to Somalia to fight in the jihads there. And of course, there was at least one, possibly as many as 5 American Muslims of Somali descent, immigrants actually from Somalia, who were involved in the Kenya Westgate Mall massacre recently. And so really it's wherever those communities are, there has been insufficient attention paid to how prevalent the jihad activity is among them. And elsewhere, of course, there are mosques that are deeply problematic, controlled by Muslim Brotherhood organizations, Saudi-funded, and spreading a noxious ideology. I mean, you have the notorious Dar al-Hijra Mosque in Northern Virginia, where Anwar al-Awlaki was the imam. And there was a succession of imams after him of the same mindset. Also, the Islamic Society of Boston, where Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi was on the original board of directors. Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, being someone who is actually barred from the United States, has praised Hitler and said that the Muslims should finish Hitler's job. And Tariq Mahana and Afia Siddiqui, both convicted jihad terrorists, were members of the Islamic Society of Boston, as well as the Tsarnaev brothers, the Boston Marathon jihad bombers. So there are mosques here and there are more others that I could name, that are very much bear watching, and there's been insufficient attention paid to them. The Islamic Society of Boston, for example, Congressman Louis Gohmert of Texas questioned Robert Mueller, the head of the FBI, about whether he had investigated that mosque before the Boston Marathon bombing. And he had to admit that he hadn't. All he had done was conduct FBI outreach to that mosque. So in service of politically correct show, he was going and shaking hands, or FBI agents were going and shaking hands with the imam and making nice. But no effort was made to look deeper into this place where somebody like Qaradawi could be on the board, and at least 3 jihadi terrorists were members.
Another issue we've heard about is Sharia law, allegations that certain groups either would like to institute on some level Sharia law, have it be perhaps a parallel legal system, if only directed at resolving issues within the Muslim American community. Is this Something that really is a high priority. Is this really a problem that Americans need to be aware of?
It is, David, and the reason why is that the Sharia is a comprehensive legal system that covers every aspect of human behavior. There's not really anything that you could think of doing as a human being that Sharia doesn't cover with various laws.
What you eat, who you go out with,
Precisely.
where you go,
How you wear your
dress.
beard, how you dress, and also the political side of things and how the society ought to be governed. So the, the, the Islamic groups that are opposing anti-Sharia laws in the United States today say that all we want is marriage arbitration, marriage tribunals, that kind of thing. It has nothing to do with anything else. But we've already seen from the example of Great Britain that promises were made that wherever Sharia conflicted with the civil law of the nation, then it would give way and the civil law would prevail. That has not turned out to be the case. And one of the most notable examples of that is spousal abuse cases. Now, obviously, spousal abuse is against the law in Britain as well as the United States. But the Quran, the holy book of Islam, says good women are obedient. As for those who are not, give them a warning, send them to separate beds, and beat them. This is chapter 4, verse 34 of the Quran. So it gives spousal abuse essentially divine sanction. And this is extraordinarily problematic and troubling, especially in light of the fact that spousal abuse cases in Britain have been repeatedly referred to the Sharia courts in violation of the promises when those courts were instituted that such cases would be referred to the civil law. The difficulty is that there's no demarcation, there's no clear distinction within Sharia itself between the personal and private aspects, the aspects governing religious observance and personal behavior, from the political aspects and the aspects that actually do contradict constitutional principles and freedoms. And so to allow the Sharia courts, we have seen, makes for these tensions to come to the fore and for the distinction between the civil law and the Sharia to be blurred, in view of the fact that Sharia as a comprehensive political system actually denies equality of rights to women, denies equality of rights to non-Muslims, denies the freedom of speech. It's very troubling to allow it into the door. It would be much simpler and much more just, I would suggest, to say that in the United States, in Britain, in Western countries, there is one law, and everyone is expected to follow that law. And if we start setting up parallel legal systems, it just becomes an avenue not only to confusion, but to disunity and to societal difficulties that can erupt into violence.
If you were going to rate on a scale of 1 to 10 how much worse radical, fundamentalist, violent Islam has become since, say, January 2009, President Obama comes into office. What's the trend line? How much more of a problem is it today than it was?
I would give that about a 7. I mean, certainly
That's pretty high.
there's a sharp uptick since January 2009 in attempted jihad attacks in the United States. Now, of course, we all know about Fort Hood, the workplace violence, where a jihad terrorist who was a major Nidal Hassan, an army psychiatrist, opened fire and murdered 13 Americans. We know about the Boston Marathon bombing. But most people don't know about just how many foiled plots there have been that were committed by Islamic jihadis, or Islamic jihadis were intending to commit them. The Times Square car bomb, which would have killed tens of thousands of people if it had gone off. There was, of course, the Detroit Christmas bomber on December 25th, 2009, I believe it was. He was intending to light a bomb that was hidden in his underwear while his airplane was over the Detroit airport. There was another jihadi in Portland, Oregon, who was going to set off a bomb at a Christmas tree lighting ceremony. There are many, many other foiled plots, and the number of these foiled plots is at least 3 times higher since Barack Obama became president. It's clear that the jihadis are emboldened. They think that law enforcement has been emasculated, has been held back from dealing accurately and honestly with these problems. And it's true. You know, Obama ordered in 2011 the complete scrubbing of any mention of Islam and jihad in connection with terrorism from all counterterror training manuals. And people like me and others who used to train FBI agents were all let go. And the thing is that while you're absolutely right, what you said at the beginning, that there are peaceful Muslims, and we're not talking about them, we're talking about this problem of jihad, to act as if there is no problem within Islam that gives rise to this, when jihadis themselves point to the texts and teachings of Islam, to the Quran, to the example of Muhammad to justify their actions, there is a problem. And to hamstring our agents and forbid them from examining this means that they're completely unprepared to understand the motives and goals of these groups that have vowed to destroy the United States. And that leaves them woefully ill-prepared to deal with the threat. And so, of course, we see more plots.
A lot of our allies in the Middle East are very unhappy with U.S. foreign policy right now. Saudi Arabia, their leaders are outraged. Turkey is not at all pleased. Of course, Egypt is furious about our foreign policy. Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel, very concerned about the direction of U.S. foreign policy. We've also seen a spread of jihad Islam from really originally Iraq, in Syria, to some extent in Saudi Arabia. Now it goes all the way down the Arab Peninsula, Yemen, goes across to the Horn of Africa, goes up to North Africa, Libya, Algeria, etc. Just to look at the map, it looks alarming.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, it's kind of ironic that the President of the United States is saying Al-Qaeda is on the ropes. Al-Qaeda is essentially defeated. And Al-Qaeda is stronger than ever, is mounting attacks in more countries. I mean, you know, people don't know, I think, in the United States mostly, about how in Mali they practically took over the entire nation and were pushed back by the French, but that story's not over. They're still fighting there. And Islamic supremacist regimes that hold the same goals as Al-Qaeda are now in power all the way across, from Tunisia, the birthplace of the Arab Spring, into Libya, and up until the military takeover in Egypt. They're fighting in Syria. They've taken over in Yemen. And this is essentially Barack Obama's doing, that by his uncritical support for the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a group that has the same goals as Al-Qaeda, just different means of getting there. He's emboldened jihadis and Islamic supremacists around the world. As the Egyptian people reminded us when the huge demonstrations broke out against the Muslim Brotherhood regime, and there were people holding up signs in Tahrir Square in Cairo saying, "Obama, stop supporting terrorists. Obama, Morsi is your man, and he's got to go." And you know, it's embarrassing for the land of the free and the home of the brave, for the United States of America to be identified with supporting terrorists. But that's what Barack Obama has done.
Are we losing, last question, are we losing the war on terror right now?
Well, yes, I'm sorry to have to say it, but I would say so, yes. Because Obama, while he has taken military action against violent jihadis, obviously he killed Osama bin Laden and Anwar al-Awlaki and the drone strikes in Pakistan and so on, and Hakimatullah Masood recently, who was killed, another one of the Taliban leader. At the same time, he's emboldened these organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood that have the same goal as Al-Qaeda, but just, as I said, different means to get there. And so how can you say that we're winning the war on terror when you've got jihadis in power in countries that used to be nominal American allies, and when you've got Israel severely threatened, that's been our most reliable ally in the Middle East, and a breach between the Prime Minister and the President of the United States because of the President's support for Israel's enemies, his unwillingness to do anything about Iran. And meanwhile, on the home front, the Justice Department's standing with these Muslim Brotherhood-linked groups like the Council on American Islamic Relations and others to gain special accommodation for Muslims in the workplace and educational institutions. And the Justice Department joining in suits of that kind, which strike directly against the core American principle of equal justice for all, and no special rights for special groups, no special privileges for special classes. It's hard to say, it's hard to be optimistic at this point, except that we know that the truth will prevail and freedom will prevail if we persevere, and so that's all we've got to do.
Perilous times. Well, Robert Spencer of Jihad Watch, thank you so much for joining us on
Thank you.
Newsmax TV. And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.